And my story is a story about my dad. He was an extraordinary man, which probably has a lot to do with the fact that our relationship was both rocky but magical in the end. And so the name of my story is A Gift from Dad. There are a couple of things you need to know. First of all, I was in my early 50s when this story happened, and I had been on a spiritual journey for many years. And I had come to a place of understanding about the transformative power of forgiveness. My dad was 85, and it was the last year of his life, as it turns out. And so when this story happens, my dad and I, our last encounter had not gone so well. So we had a year of not talking. When one Easter morning, so I was driving to Easter sunrise service, and this voice or intuition or whatever you want to call it told me to drive 1.5 hours to my dad's house. So I headed east out of Rutland, Vermont on Route 4, up and over Killington Mountain, down the other side, just a little ways past the ski area. I take a left on a little dirt road and I pass through a narrow valley with steep hills on both sides. I go through the quaint little hamlet of Sherburne and Roaring Brook Falls, which is part of the Appalachian Trail. And then on my right, immediately on my right, I see this hand-painted sign that says, "Caution, man at play." I pull in behind a little pickup truck that has license plates that say Birdo, B-I-R-D-O. I get out of the truck and I enter what can only be described as a man-made natural playground. I'm surrounded by the sounds of water, birds, chipmunks. I can't help but smile. It's just so serene and beautiful. And I look up and I can hardly distinguish my dad's house from the steep, wooded hillside. He's designed it in such a way that he can lie in bed with a full view of a waterfall right outside his window as it cascades over large, lichen-covered boulders. And so my dad had been divorced years ago from my mom, and he spent the best years of his life building and landscaping this dream house with a waterfall. So I make my way to his door, and I'm about to knock, but my heart is pounding. Much like the ups and downs of Killington Mountain Road, my dad's mood swings over the years had been impossible to predict. If he was on the upswing, I would have been greeted with loud bird calls from his deck, erupting from his fingers and lips. If he was on the downswing, however, I could just as easily be turned gruffly away, which I had experienced once or twice. And this is the man who had adopted my 2 sisters and me, the middle one, when I was 4. As he says, who could resist 3 little fatherless towheads? And he had tried to be a good father. He had delighted in hiding jelly beans for Easter, playing Santa, and I really loved the skating rink he made for us with the night lights so we could skate till bedtime. But I also have vivid memories of his belt on our bare behinds and no recollection of what we'd done to warrant it. Now, my dad was multi-talented. He was a biology and phys ed teacher. He was an alligator wrestler. He had served as a lieutenant with the 2nd Group of Navy SEALs in the history of the United States. And he had survived a kamikaze attack on his ship. But most of all, he was a professional clown named Birdo. And he was always on stage, larger than life, and impossible to have a conversation with, as you can imagine. He could juggle anything, including fire and swords, even while riding a unicycle or jumping on a trampoline. And his bird calls had gotten him in trouble more than once in the local supermarkets, where the general reaction was either to run in the opposite direction or gather around in astonishment and wonder at what he could do. And my dad's greatest passion was instilling, with a can-do attitude, inspiring kids and adults with a can-do attitude to stay fit and healthy. He'd always said his mantra was, "There's no such word as can't." And he'd also had these T-shirts made up to give away that say, "If it is to be, it's up to me." But now at 85, this man of play had become an angry, outwardly angry and kind of bitter man. after the tragic death of his favorite daughter, who was my half-sister, named Cookie, as he affectionately called her. She was only 42, with 2 young boys. She was a blonde-haired, blue-eyed beauty, and in his eyes she could do no wrong. And so the last time we had spoken, my dad and I, he had said some hurtful things to me, and so I had stayed away until now. So I take a deep breath, and I knock at his door. And after a few minutes, he opens the door and he says gruffly, "What do you want?" With tears in my eyes, I reply, "I don't know, I'm just here." And so he starts crying too, and we hug. And thus begins a wonderful year of healing together, in which we actually talk about the belt. "I never did that," he says. But my sister and I both said, "Yes, you did." And then a look of horror comes over his face. "I did that? Oh my God," as he covered his face and he sobbed. My dad was truly a changed man after this. And it was remarkable that this little moment of forgiveness had given our hearts a way to find the love that was always there. So I could end my story here, because it's a happy ending. But 6 months after my dad died, something really magical happened. I was driving our small farm dump truck to get sawdust one day when I hear a loud thud, and I jerk my head to the right, and I see a rose-breasted grosbeak is stuck on the rim of my side view mirror. And it's positioned in such a way that I can see the rose-colored breast in the shape of a bleeding heart, as they call it. And then it fell away. Well, I was mortified at what I'd done to this little bird at first. But then I realized that if this bird was showing up in my life, it must be for a reason. And I immediately thought of my dad, Birdo. And so when I got home, I got out Ted Andrews' book, Animal Speak, and I looked up rose-breasted grosbeak. And he says this beautiful little bird can help us in healing family hurts and restoring family love. Thank you.